Big hand.
Yeah. Test. Should I hear myself? There. Are we live? Soon. Okay. Sorry. Hi everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Goran Vukšić. I work for a company Stratitech, and we are like 6 years member of Fugu Cafe or something like that. But in past 3 years, we haven't been really active in community, and we decided to change that. So I spoke with Michael that. Yeah, let's organize some nice events, and this is our first meetup, and we have a great speaker over here, Kenneth, and he will introduce himself, so I will leave stage to him.
Perfect. I'll start by unlocking my PC, so we're ready. So, hi everyone, and welcome to this event. I'm going to talk a bit about the future of the web, what's going on, and especially a project we call Project Fugu. So, first of all, my name is Kenneth Christiansen. I work for a small semiconductor. Maybe you've heard of them. It's called Intel. But as today, like, you can make a lot of hardware, but if you don't have the software and the enablers to actually use it, it's kind of useless. So at Intel, we're doing more and more on technology side as a software side. And I'm in the web platform team, web platform engineering team. So this means that I work on web browsers themselves. So I've used to work a lot on, move it a little bit like this. So I used to work a lot on WebKit, then moved on to Chromium. So today I'm working on the Chrome browser and now the Edge browser, which is also using Chromium as the engine behind the browser. And as part of that, I'm also working on standards, especially in the W3C. It's called the World Wide Web Consortium. But I'm also an elected member to the technical architecture group inside the W3C, where we're kind of like looking at all what is happening on the web and making sure that everything makes sense and is aligned. So we then don't end up with a lot of different APIs that don't work in conjunction. So the first thing you might be wondering is, like, why does a company as Intel care about the web? And actually on desktop, you see that more than, like Microsoft actually said this, more than 60% of the time people spending on PCs, on laptops, is inside the web browser. And that's not just it, because people also use other apps like installed, like say Visual Studio Code. If you're a developer, you probably know about Visual Studio Code, or maybe Slack, Microsoft Teams, and all of these are actually built using web technology, using something called Electron. And in the future, they should be able to just run in the browser as well. So the web is really a great platform because it's safe. You can go to different websites without having to worry about things happening to your computer. It also has these other things. There's really great reach. The web runs across different platforms and different devices. It's also ephemeral. So if you imagine, like, you go to a country and you need to install an app to pay for parking. You probably forget to remove that app when you go home. And it keeps on updating and updating. So still there on your device, taking up your resources, using your broadband, etc. But that's not the case on the web. If you don't go to a website, if you don't interact with something, it's kind of removed. Like the cache entries become old, and when you're out of cache, like, they just get removed. So it's kind of, it disappears. It's ephemeral. There's also a lot of other advantages with the web, like it's indexable. You get something like Google. So, like, you can find different things. You can do research online, and it's also like deep linkable, which means that I might see a tweet on Twitter, and I can take the exact link, the URL to that tweet, and send it to my mom. She'll click and she'll see that exact tweet. It won't say like, "Oh, please install this app. Oh, now sign up." And now, by the way, I don't know what you're looking for, but maybe you can search and find it. It's there directly. And you can even take that a step further and embed it into another website. So you might have like a news website that will talk about something going on, and they will quote like an expert who was tweeting about it inside of that news article. So the web is also composable. Basically everything on the web starts just using a URL. So if you've been to any web conference in the last couple of years, you've most certainly heard about PWAs, also known as progressive web apps. So just as a summary, these are apps. You build a new web technology that allows these apps to run offline, so they can work offline, or they can even be flexible, so they can work with intermittent network connection. They're also performant and responsive. So like when you click on things should happen. All this can be built with web technology today. So the web platform is a pretty amazing place to be. You have this worldwide reach to different people. It works across different architectures, operating systems, and form factors. It also has a thriving ecosystem around it, using even like IDEs like Visual Studio Code, Node.js, different libraries you can pull in to create your experiences, frameworks, etc. It's flexible enough to cater to different use cases such as applications, news websites, books, games, etc. And you can write web applications that are really performant as well. Apart from this, there's actually a lot of APIs, a lot more APIs that people know. And it may also be one of the problems of the web, because there's not like one resource to go to where you learn like, this is everything you can do on the web. So there's maybe something we could improve there. But there is actually a lot of APIs and a lot of things you can do with web applications today. So I'm just looking at an example for progressive web app. So progressive web apps, initially they only worked on phones, but today they even work on desktop computers. So here this is running Chrome OS. This would also work on Windows. You'll see I go to this website. Chrome will show this like install thing up here. It will turn into just the bottom in a few seconds. If I click on that, and this website is having like a web app manifest, a service work with all the requirements to become a progressive web app. If you click on it, you can actually install it. Immediately when I click on install, it turns into this native-like experience where you cannot distinguish it from any other native app. It really looks really well integrated. You get an icon and everything. I even think I have like the icon down there. So it really becomes like any other app. And these also, it's possible to make these apps so they work offline as well. So in a sense, the web is really great. But sometimes it might not be feasible for your experiences, because maybe there's an API that you need for your experience, it's core to your experience, and it's just not available on the web. So, example, let's say there is actually support of like Bluetooth today, but let's say that you want to write an app to connect to a device, and that requires Bluetooth. Well, if there wasn't any Bluetooth available, well, then you just couldn't make that as a web app. It might also be the fear that there's coming an API in the future that may be become important to you. So this is actually one of the feedback that Google got when they went out and talked to partners. So some people said like, yeah, it's fine. I really love progressive web apps. I really want to do this app. But my competitors are doing like native iOS and Android app. And like right now we're winning. Everyone wants our progressive web app. It's great. It's small. It's easy to install. But what if next year you're going to announce like a new API? And suddenly everyone wants this API. It's called the Magic API or the Machine Learning API. And now I'm like, when will this come to the web? Do I need to wait 2 years? Will I go out of business in 2 years? Or do I need to reconsider and start to do like a native app just because of this? So it's kind of like lacking this kind of API roadmap for the web, and all of this together brings a kind of distrust in the platform as a whole. So I had this example like with the makeup like Magic API, which can like drive people to your competitors, and you might not know when it will be coming to the web. In some cases, you might be able to actually implement it or polyfill it, kind of like emulate it. But if the performance is not there, it might not be feasible as well. So you might be wondering, okay, so then I got to do native, right? But though some people believe that native must always be better than the web, it's not always the case. Because as we said before, like the web is very frictionless. It's just like put in a URL or send a URL to someone and click on the URL and you're there. You don't need to, please install 500 megabytes and sign up and whatnot. You can do this like really frictionless experiences. And like I said, you can compose things like a tweet inside a different website. You cannot do that with native apps. You have this like deep linkable links, like links into a specific place inside an app. In some native applications they're trying to emulate that, but the web is kind of like built in. And it actually does accessibility really well out of the box as well. So there's also other disadvantages, like doing native is a different skill set. So if you're developers in your company that are really good with web, telling them to do native is, well, they need to start from scratch to learn how that works. And it's different per platform. It's not like you do your Android apps and you can just like apply all those skills to create an iOS app or Windows app. It's different per platform. So that also means that often these native applications, they also don't tend to scale so well. So I guess the web has been lucky in the sense that we always have different screen sizes. So like monitors were not the same size, so we need to create experiences and primitives in the web platform so that you could create responsive apps that would work on a small screen, like a phone and a big screen. Whereas the native apps, like an iPhone, well, they're all like basically the same size. Got an iPad, is basically the same size. It's a bit different today. There's a big more screen size to choose from, but it has been pretty stable. So that's what you saw. Google tried to do like, oh, we have Android, let's do a tablet. All apps just look like scaled up phone apps because the platform didn't have all those primitives to create these nice experiences. But that is something that's also built in on the web. Of course, if you're going to have like a team for Windows, a team for iOS, a team for Android, and re-educate all your developers, it can get quite costly. So a lot of people have been looking at alternatives. There's some alternatives out there. There used to be Cordova, now it's PhoneGap. They kind of like said that they're not like promoting that any longer, so it's kind of like a dead product. But we have Capacitor from our friends of Ionic. It's kind of like a replacement. But it doesn't really bring the best of both worlds. It's kind of in some sense you get the worst of both worlds, I think, because you lose like the deep linkability. You still have the friction because you need to install and package. Sometimes maybe package some of the runtime with your app. You have native dependencies because these often come with like plugins to tie into the camera and all of this. So you have this dependency now, and that plugin might work different across platforms. You also often normally also need to build it, so you need to use Xcode on Mac, something else on Windows, something else on Android, and of course, like you cannot get embedded inside another experience, though you might be able to embed things inside your own experience because you're a web app. So how can we fix this? Like, how can we regain the trust in the web? So this is one of the things we've been thinking a lot about us working on the Chrome project. So I looked a bit like myself, like what is blocking, what do I believe is blocking people from adopting the web today? So we looked at like potential high performance code. You might have some code that's really fast. It might be existing code. Example was Autodesk. They wrote their code for like 35 years ago and has been improving since. Just like rewriting that in a performant way in JavaScript, it's going to take a while. It's going to be difficult. So today we have WebAssembly that allows you to compile existing C or C++ code, Rust as well, more languages coming, to some kind of binary format that is optimized for the web. It's fast at loading, so it's kind of compressed, so it's small, but it also then like gets the performance benefit of native to be as close to the metal as possible. And that's also becoming better because it's getting support for single instruction multiple data, very important for decoders and animation frameworks and games, and also like support of threads, which you don't have in JavaScript. So that allows people to have this existing code or need to write some specific code that needs to use like SIMD or threads to be performant enough, like a image decoder. They can use SIMD and call this from JavaScript. If you look at that performance, like scrolling, animation, this is getting much better. You can for a long time you've been able to use workers on the web, but like the API was not so nice. Now there are very good libraries around it, like Comlink, import from worker. There's the whole project called Houdini. So this is people working on CSS. They kind of took a step back and said, how can we allow people to extend CSS, get access to what's below CSS, like the rendering, the layout engine, so that people don't need to wait for browsers to ship like this feature, but they can maybe write them themselves or customize it. So this is the whole project Houdini. A lot of this is already shipping in Chrome, like we have CSS Paint that kind of like gives you access to the Canvas API, at least to the API, but inside a worklet, so it's kind of like a light worker, and then you can like write this like element or like paint operation that will just be super highly optimized if you need to do some fancy animation, which a lot of people like to do. Same with animation worklet, having all of this run not in the main thread, and like interact with your JavaScript, but run it as separately when you're doing animations and scrolling, etc. Also something called subtree visibility. Very interesting. It allows you to have the DOM, like the semantic web, which is searchable. You can do finding page in the browser, but it not render it, not do all the layout until you need it. So you can imagine you have something like a scrolling list. So you don't want to do layout for all this because you don't even know if someone's going to scroll. But if you still want people to be able to do finding page, and when they do that, you want, oh, now I can render that part where you're going to. It could also be something like a collapse menu, where there's an image and whatnot there. You don't want to spend. Oh, just close this. You don't want to spend any time doing that layout and rendering unless people actually need it. So this allows people to get even like faster experiences. Another issue, like this is what I personally thought, is like I think it's really bad that we don't have like a good toolkit on the web. Because if you go to create a native app, like an iOS app or an Android app, you go to documentation and say like, I need a button. Okay, this is what you use. It's a material button on Android. It's a different button on iOS, but you know it's there. You know they work really well. It's very integrated. Sometimes, maybe later, you need to style it a bit different. You need to write your own. On the web, it's kind of like the other way around, like there's nothing. Yes, there is the original HTML element, but they outdated. They don't look very nice. And that's not what we want to show to your users. So either you take those and you try to style them, which could be nice because they have nice built-in accessibility and all of that. Or you need to choose like a framework and which has the components and figure out how well are they maintained. Are they being maintained by Google? Do I trust that company? It's called Ionic, or it's like a community thing. Like it's a lot of investment there. I think this is partly being solved by web components. Web components has been out for a while. That's not what this talk is about. But like it's getting a lot of adoption today because it's basically supported across all browsers except IE11, which is dying fast. It can work in IE11 with some polyfills. It will have a cost for those users, but they have a cost anyway because they're using a very old browser. You're seeing like Google moving to material web components. Ionic built everything across web components, so they work with any framework or without any framework if you don't need it. But you also see that even Microsoft are creating, like they have like Microsoft Teams is written in Angular. I think Word and Outlook is written in React, Microsoft version of React. But like now in the future, they can use these components for all of their properties, even inside Edge. So Edge is already using this it's called Fast, so it's called Microsoft Fast. So you go to fast.design, you can see this element. And like a lot of other companies like Salesforce, Adobe, all these companies are looking at using web components because it brings it closer to the platform. There's also another very interesting project that was started by Microsoft called OpenUI. So OpenUI is basically a way for, especially like Microsoft, so this is the Fast, people work on Fast, and even like Salesforce is part of it. So they work together, look at all these component sets that exist today, and try to see like what is in common, and whether they could write like a component that would work for all. So Microsoft and Salesforce are trying to actually come up so when they have like a tab component or element, it will have the same properties, the same function, the same attributes, and even have a way that is really nice to style it. So it will look like a Salesforce property or a Microsoft property. And the idea is that if they manage to do this correctly, then they want to propose these new elements to the HTML spec. So these will become the new HTML element. But a difference from the existing element is that they will be extendable because they still have all the hooks to custom or to the web component specifications like custom elements and shadow paths and all these specs are called, that allows you to have much more flexibility in styling and changing the behavior. So that would bring us to a very nice future. So there's a lot of things going on the web that it will become much better soon. But what I'm here to talk about today is Project Fugu. So Project Fugu is about the capabilities. So here we have an example of AutoCAD working in the browser. So this is done by Autodesk. It's running a code base that's 35 years old. They took a canvas element, then they're using the engine compiled from C++ into WebAssembly to actually run the whole view. Then they wrote the whole component just using web technology. They're actually using React in this case. So like they could basically bring like most of like their Autodesk into the browser. There's a few things missing. They don't support the 3D disk files, but they say like this covers 90% of all files, Autodesk files that exist. They still need something like SIMD. They're even looking for a future spec called WebGPU instead of WebGL. That's like closer to the metal, more modern, to bring that last 10% to the web. But they're getting pretty far. But they're also missing things like access to local files. And it happens that a lot of people that actually work on these things, they like to have files locally. They might be like the city of Malmö, and they might not be that happy to have another cloud service, because now they need to use the Autodesk cloud service to save the files, and not like maybe the OneDrive from Microsoft, which they normally use, or like Google Drive, or whatever they're using. So you can imagine like every service on the web, if it has to have a different file storage, that's kind of bad. Some people would like just to use local files. Sometimes these files are also very big, so it's kind of like a daunting to download them every time to make a change. So this is where we have like Project Fugu. So this was a project that was started by Google, then later joined by Intel and Microsoft. So Fugu, or Hugu, that's apparently how it's pronounced, is Japanese for the pufferfish. So this is this very cute fish that they actually tend to eat in Japan, because it's very delicious. I have actually tasted this. It's actually pretty good. But if you don't prepare correctly, you know how to cut it. Because there's poison inside it, the poison will go out in the meat. You'll eat it, you'll die. So you need to like study many years to be a fugu chef in Japan. And that's kind of like what we're trying to hint at here. Is like, if we get this wrong by exposing these like native capabilities to the web, this might be really bad. So we're really trying to say that we want the web to have the same capabilities as native apps, but we want to expose it in a way that's true to the web, to like the core tenets of the web as privacy, trust, and security, and what else is like the web is known for. So there's a read up from Google. You can go to bit.ly/powerful APIs, and this is like how they announced it. That talks a bit about this project. You can also go to the Chromium bug tracker, where you can kind of like see what is going on, what's people working on. I think it's always nice to see like when something was modified, so you know, that's what they're working on now. But they also have this called the API, the Fugu API tracker. So this is really interesting. So this is an open spreadsheet. So you can kind of look at an API name. You can see whether it's like shipped, who's like the main driver behind it. So Google, Intel. So this was mine. So this Intel. There's also some Microsoft now. This is from week 13, so it's long ago. Whether it's like mostly related to progressive web app and desktop, or mobile, desktop and mobile. Whether it's available in Chrome behind a flag, so you can turn it on as a developer hacker and play around with it. Whether it has shipped, that's when you see the Fugu fish. Or if it's in something called an origin trial, we'll talk about it later, then it will be the green area. And then you can like look at this is like the stable version of Chrome, the beta, and the canary version at a specific point. So the whole process for bringing these, so I guess like to take a step back, the idea here is that we want to regain trust in the web. So we want people to know that we are working on fixing the gap between native and web, and then like showing that we can do this on a pretty fast rotation. So when the native apps get the new API, we will have that for the web soon after. So even people maybe inside of Google or Microsoft, they know, we're bringing out this new API in Windows in a year, so they will start working on preparing this API. So maybe when it's announced, they can start like showing it in public and go through the process, so it will be in the hands of web developers, at least as an origin trial or behind a flag when they're shipping. So the way this works is that we try to identify need and use cases. We don't just like do something. Then we write what is called an explainer. There's actually a link here to something we call the explainer that explains to you how to write an explainer. With me? So this is kind of like a document that will kind of like explain you why are we doing this, what are the use cases, what are the different options, what are the things we have tried, we abandoned, etc., etc. It's kind of like a big introduction to why this makes sense. And then we solicit like feedback from other browser vendors and the web developer community, and try to iterate on this. and try to come up with some ideas. Maybe start even writing like the specification text. Then at some point it will be good enough. We'll formalize the spec and we'll like look to public support, try to promote it more at conferences, showing demos. It should be behind a flag by this point. And then like at some of the last steps we do this origin trial, which I'll get back into, and then eventually we should ship it. Unless it's a really, really bad idea that we say like we're not gonna do this. This was really a bad idea. This has never happened, but it could happen. So yeah, sure. That depends a lot on the API. But if you go to this, if you look at this like this list, if you open it up today, we can look at it a bit later. You will see like how much we have shipped since this project started in a year. It's a lot. So a lot of these has happened within a year. So it's much faster. When I started working on the W3C, we saw APIs taking like I think like around 6 years to ship. So that was like a long time. That's not doable. That's not good enough. I think here it really depends on like how important is the API and who has the resource to drive it. But we have seen things like shipping now, like this web share target, and there's like even like the native file system. It's shipping now, like that is within a year. Some small APIs is taking like I worked on Wakelog, that maybe half a year. It was an idea before, but since I took over and actually looked at it seriously, it's taking less than half a year to actually go through whole the specification, get the feedback, different white reviews, and actually getting shipping. That doesn't mean it's shipping by all other browsers, but of course that is the idea. But inside of the Chromium project, I think around a year. But of course, if you take something really big or new, like say like we already did this before Fugu, like Web Bluetooth, that took longer. There's a lot of things there. They're also working on something called web bundling, where you can bundle up files and shipping. It's not really Fugu, but that is something that touches a lot of security and networking, and so it's taking longer. So it's really depending on API. But I think the idea is that like around a year, max. So an origin trial is this thing that allows you to use a feature before it's actually shipping in a browser. So the way it works is that you say, I have an origin, that is my website, it's www.something, so that's considered an origin. And then you can go to this website and say, hey, I would like to sign up to, I want to use the content indexing API. So you register, they give you a token. So this token you can put inside your HTML, or you can put in the header, even or the networking headers. And that will enable that feature for your origin. So now you can actually try this out on real people, your users. There is some threshold set in place, so you don't want Google to put it on google.com or Facebook, because then people depend on it and say like, you have to use this API, we cannot make changes. So there's like, I think like, if there's more than, let's say, like 1 million people using it, maybe the cut is there. So you need to make your experience so that it works without the feature. So it needs to work with the feature and without the feature. The other reason is that every time you get, it only works for one Chrome release. So when that Chrome release goes out of business, well, then that feature is turned off. The idea is that, of course, there's a beta version before, so you'll be able to register for the new version before the next release, which might have changes, because the whole idea with this idea is to get people to experiment and provide feedback. So when you go in and actually say, like, I want to renew, then you need to give feedback. So like, yes, this worked great for us. Yes, but we had some issue. And yes, this was a bad idea. So the whole idea here is that to get people to try this API in real life and provide real feedback. We didn't used to do that. We used to like, well, because people don't give any feedback before you're shipping, so you're like, oh, I think it's good, you think it's great, I have the best API ever, you ship and everyone's like, this is the worst API ever. And you cannot change it because now everyone is using it. And that was a really bad place to be in. So this is an idea that we can get out of that. So you might be wondering, what are we working on, or what have we been working on in the Fugu project? So one of the things is especially interesting for the enterprise is hardware connectivity. So I've heard a lot of people say, why do you need to connect to Bluetooth and whatnot? But actually in the enterprise, there are a lot of use cases for this. A friend of mine worked at a company where they're doing like CPR dolls, and some of these use their USB, but they were in the hospital. People had like really old different computers. Some came maybe with a new laptop, Windows laptop, and like having testing everywhere and having to go out and actually update the software on these computers with different administrators and whatnot was like really difficult. So they really wanted just like something that would work with the web. Like they already had like, oh, we can install Chrome, that's fine. This we can handle. No native app, no that can crash the system and approve, like just the web. So with web USB is actually what they started by using. They could like create a whole new experience that would work with existing dolls. And the next thing is that the new dolls had Bluetooth, so now they're using web Bluetooth instead. We even saw Roomba, you know Roomba, the cleaning thing. They made a tool, a toy for like a tool or toy for kids called the Roomba Root, where you can even put like a pencil in the middle and you can make it draw and program it. And like it uses web Bluetooth. So if you take a Chromebook or Windows computer, you just install Chrome or any one other browser like Edge that uses web Bluetooth, and that's how you connect to this device. So there are definitely a lot of use cases. So the first thing we worked on pre-Fugu, but really considered part of Fugu, was web Bluetooth and web USB. So an example here, you can like control like a Lego thing using web Bluetooth. I have another talk that goes into great details about both web USB and web Bluetooth, so you can watch that on, I can share the slides afterward, so you can watch that on YouTube. So this is one of the things that is already shipping inside of Chrome and Chromium-based browsers. We're still working on a few additions, like the specs for USB and Bluetooth, they don't stand still, so we still need to make sure that we have all the new things. For instance, you can create like beacons, kind of like beacons, like I have these Xiaomi temperature and humidity sensors at home, so they just send out like a broadcast. So you can create you can create a web app that will just read those, and that is currently behind the flag, but not shipping yet. So they're still working on these things. One of the issues, like one of the reasons why people actually wanted to do like web USB is especially people working on IoT. They say like, oh, we have all these IoT devices and we really want to talk to them using USB. And that was fine, except that a lot of them came with a USB stack that was not programmable. So like you could not actually talk over USB from the device itself to the computer. You had to use serial. They had like a serial API. And the chip controlling the USB was like proprietary, not something they could flash or anything. But when you're using a serial device on Windows or Linux, like on Linux it's a pain, because there's this thing called, that's like trying to steal your device, and then you have to approve this device in a text file. But on Windows, like, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, it's a modem, and Windows like now owns this device. So even with the web USB thing, you could not communicate with serial devices because Windows would claim it and say like, no, it's mine. I need a driver for it. So now with web serial, we actually have this API that allows you to talk serial using what is already in the OS to talk to these devices. So this is especially interesting for legacy systems, IoT products, etc. So this is, I don't believe it's shipping yet. I haven't updated these slides. I need to look at what has changed since I used this presentation last time. But last time I looked at it, it was in an audio trial, getting like the feedback from developers. Same thing, WebHit. This is another standard that runs on top of USB and Bluetooth. So it kind of stands for human interface devices, I believe. So like a keyboard and a mouse. Because you can imagine, like, I don't want like to plug in my keyboard and have a web app say like, I want to use this device. You go and select your keyboard as the device you're communicating with, and suddenly like that controls my keyboard. That's kind of would be bad. So we need an API that like this, but still a lot of companies use this API HIT because it's simpler than USB to create like a barcode scanner or a gamepad. So we still need to support HIT for these kind of devices. By the way, I haven't showed you this here, but like it might sound very scary. Oh, my website can go and talk to Bluetooth. It is done in a way that the user is in control. So if you first go to a website, you'd have to do a user gesture, like click on something, before it can show you to like, I want to connect to a Bluetooth device. Then it will show some trusted UI listing the devices around you. This is not shared with the website at all. At that point, you can click on the device and say, yes, I will allow this website to talk to this specific device. And at that point, the device will have this connection to the website will have this connection to the device. So it's not like you can surf the web and suddenly like someone is gonna like connect to your devices and steal your info. No, the user is very clear about what is happening, and of course that can be revoked at any time. So WebHit is also quite new and is being tested at this point. Something I have been working on myself is NFC, so near field communication. So NFC is actually a lot of different standards. Actually, you have like different tags, like these stickers with tags. There are actually like 4. Actually, today there's 5 standards. So it seemed that when they did this standard, like you got people from Sony joining people from Philips, joining people from Nokia, and they're like, yeah, let's make this standard together. My standard we call A, my standard we call B. So they kind of like, we support all of them, but they don't work the same. So it encompasses a lot of different technology for payment. So what we look at for the web is basically just, let's allow us, just using this standard is kind of like really high level called NDEF. It's like NFC data exchange format. So this allows you to write data to some of these tags and read data back. So it's not like access to payments and the things, but still enabling a lot of nice use cases. So you can read and write records to these NFC tags. It's very complete end of support, and it's done in a way that's really true to JavaScript. So it's much easier to use from JavaScript than any native API, where you really need to care about all these details. The cool thing is that I even showed it to the inventor of the web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and even he was excited. So I love this picture. So here's like one example of a small game that should have been auto-playing. Let's try. So the idea here is let's see if we can remove the noise. It should be auto-playing and without the sound. Like this. Better. Now I'll go back so I can explain you what it does. Like the idea is that this game, you see it on a picture like the order, and then you need to click it will show you the order like quickly, and then you need to redo the order. So it's just like these are all like NFC tags. So it's just like a cool little game to show like what you could do with such technology. But this was done by my friend at Google, Francois. I think it's showing another example I did here. So this is like a grocery list thing. I had this idea that, grocery list is kind of nice, so I made this small example. And then I thought like, I'm just showing off the app. It's like, well, instead of like writing these directly to the grocery list, I made this thing here called write to NFC tag. So you see I'm doing it this time, clicking that. So instead of just adding it to my grocery list, I'll actually just write this to an NFC tag. So right next to my refrigerator where I have my beer, I can have this NFC tag. So in the future when I'm out of beer, I just tap it and it will be automatically added to my grocery list. So that's kind of like what I'm showing here, that I'm adding all these kind of items. You saw I got the NFC tags, I just wrote to it. And you see that I got all of these things, beer, candy, cocoa, milk. So just to show you like what this kind of technology allows you to do. Oh, very simple. Here we changed the API. It's not shipping yet. It's very close. It has been an origin trial, but we're making a few changes. I think it will be done in a week or so, and then we can look when we can release it. So I'm creating an NDEF reader. I have an on-reading event. I could also add event listening and reading. Doesn't matter. That gives me a message which contains records. So here I'm iterating over the records. If I want to stop reading, like I started by scanning. If I want to stop, I can do this abort controller. This is a new thing on the web that allows me to do that. Here's a more like elaborate example. So you see I'm actually looking at what is the record type. So if it's JSON, I just print it out. If it's opaque, and I look at the MIME type, and the MIME type starts with image, well then I'm generating an image element actually in reading that image and putting it into the DOM. Just to show you that it's quite flexible. A lot of things like working with JSON and whatnot is very simple, but I really encourage you to check out the article web.dev/NFC from Google that Francois wrote. It's really good. It really shows you all of these examples. But this is, as currently, it's out of origin trial, but we found out we got some feedback. We're incorporating that feedback, and we're almost done implementing that feedback. We already changed the spec, so when that is done, we hope we can ship this very soon. Intel also worked on generic sensors. So we had this issue on the web. You have GPS, like geolocation, physical geolocation sensor. You had like a device orientation and device motion. But these APIs actually had a lot of issues. So a lot of people said like, this is really bad. Like if you use one on iOS and one on Android, they'll give you like different angles. So you're kind of like, so this is kind of like a list of what we like wrote down, like the specifications were unmaintained, lots of limitation on dispatching, a lot of problem with interoperability, security, privacy. You cannot extend them. You cannot do sensor fusion if you want to take an accelerometer and gyroscope and do your own thing. You cannot say like, I only need like, I want to save battery, so just give me like a frequency of 15. No, gotta be 60 frames events per second. Like all of this we couldn't do. So we end up doing this like new sensor API that's in Chrome, where you have like an ambient light sensor, gyroscope, accelerometers. Some of these are derived sensors. So out of accelerometer you can derive linear acceleration. Or some of them are like combined or fusion sensors, like a relative orientation sensor will use like, I don't remember, gyroscope and accelerometer or whatever in some way. And actually I have this other presentation that goes into great detail about like how all of this works, how these sensors work like down below. And there's even an explainer on W3C called, I believe it's called a motion explainer. And I'm sure it's linked from this one, where I go into details about like how to do, what are all these different kinds of sensors, how do you mix them up, how do you do sensor fusion. Because like when I got assigned to work on this project, I thought like, I'm just gonna buy a book from Amazon about sensor fusion because like everyone does sensors. That doesn't exist. It seems like most of the companies, they think like this is like proprietary, I should keep that inside, I shouldn't tell anyone how this works. So I actually had to learn all of that and figure it out and talk to an expert. So I ended up writing a big document detailing how it works. So here's another example. This API is intended to be really simple. So I made this demo kind of like a what's called like a compass. And I was like, it's so easy, the API, that I have this other IoT device at home that I can program, and it talks Bluetooth. So using the web Bluetooth API, I emulated the same API. It took me half an hour, and now I haven't showed you another demo how it worked before, but like you can see that now I'm using my IoT device to like drive my sensor inside my application. So I just thought it was like really nice to show that it was so simple that this can be polyfilled or it can be emulated by data from other places. So kind of like it's called generic sensor, so it's supposed to be a generic framework. We also wrote, I wrote polyfills because this is not supported on iOS. A lot of people said, yeah, until Apple have the time and resources and want to implement this, people said, oh, it's not nice, I cannot use it. So I said like, hey, they do have support for device rotation and device motion events, etc. So I can emulate these as well as possible, working around those differences between Android and iOS and known issues. And I did that and wrote these polyfills, so you would use them just like the existing APIs. If you're on Android, it supports it on Chrome OS device, it will use the original Chrome implementation. If not, it will use my polyfill. Something else, I don't know, how are we with time? 3 minutes, okay, let's continue. True, so I'll wait until we get pizza. Perfect. So something else that's very important on the web is sharing. It's all about it. I talked about URLs, sending links to each other. But like all these native apps today, they have this share sheet. You can share into an application, share into Instagram. And it would be quite nice to be able to do that from the web as well. So on the web, we worked on Web Share API. So Web Share API allows you to send very simple things like URL, text, and today also files, like images, to one of these installed apps. So very simple. The cool thing is that we also want to receive shares. I also want to create my progressive web app, Twitter, and I want people from Instagram or whatever other web app or native app to share into my app, my progressive web app, my web experience. So we extended the web app manifest used for progressive web apps to support this. It's piggybacking on the existing form support in browsers, and this has also been this is already shipping, and now people are working on extending this with file support, and that might actually be shipping soon. So you can both share to any application, web or native, or you can be shared to from any application, web or native, as long as you're installed as a progressive web app. Something else, back to the AutoCAD issue, I want to write and read to files. So we looked at a lot of like Electron apps. Why is Visual Studio Code not a progressive web app? Well, because like the file API on the web is kind of like upload style. Like you upload a file, then you can work on it. You want to save it, well then you download it. That's not what people want. Especially if you're working on a source directory, we have like hundreds of files. You want to be able to say, this is my directory, give me access using inside this browser. So people have worked on the native file system, which I believe already shipped or is shipping the next version of Chrome. So there's an API where you can actually go and select the directory or file, and you can get like consistent access to it across session. So even for a session, or maybe in the future, it will be able to get like a kind of like a handle, a serializable handle. So you can take this handle, put it inside an IndexedDB or local storage and whatnot, and use that handle next time when the app is started or you go to the website. You'll be able to get access to that file or directory again. The API is also modern, so it allows you to work with streams and async await. So it's a much more modern API to deal with files. Of course, written in a way that is actually also efficient, because file access is often needs to be quite efficient. We have really fast hard drives today, SSDs and the like. So this is very soon shipping. That went through a couple of Orient trials where they changed the API. Initially it wasn't based on streams, now it's based on streams. It's a much better API. So Orient trials are very important to bring that feedback back to the standardization process. Media and playback, especially for phones. When you have like your web app or YouTube, whatever, playing a song, it's kind of nice that you could be able to show something in your notification tray that even allows you to interact with it. This also works on laptops and Chrome OS devices where you have these special keys. API, super simple. A few kind of events you can subscribe to. When those get triggers, you play an action. Very, very simple API. So this is also shipping. The other APIs is also something we worked on at Intel, and this will work a lot on media, codecs, encoders, and the like. Very important, especially for saving battery life. You want to do as much in hardware as possible. So we looked at image capture on the web. We also looked at exposing all kinds of things, because like you couldn't create something like Instagram on the web. You had access to camera, but you couldn't really control like exposure and the camera, the finer detail. Not even for like a video conferencing system. A lot of these cameras, they support pan, tilt, and zoom. So they can hear that Sherry over there is talking a lot, and from that direction, and actually be able to pan to her face and zoom in. So in a live stream, you can get all of this. So you can combine like machine learning and what to like, but also control the camera. So like Intel has been working on supporting all of these things and making performant so that you can do examples like this. Funny hats experience that we created, or some of my co-workers created. I didn't create it. I just complained about the code. Or like other examples here, you actually see an example of the pan, tilt, and zoom. So see, it's kind of nice. Of course, some cameras, especially upcoming cameras, also support depth sensing. They can actually feel how far you're away. So with this example, like we're ready for it. Even Intel has some cameras that supports that. You can even say like, oh, everything that's further away than a meter, I just want to blur, and that's where I put my background image. Of course, that will create a much better experience than just using machine learning and trying to guess how far things are away. Like I often go to Teams and I see people applying these filters, and there's some black around their heads, and I'm like, what is this? Oh, he had a headset on. You know, this is actually really, really precise. It's so precise that one of my coworkers did this example using one of these cameras. And I think this is kind of like really, really exciting. Like you can actually pick up a box and put it on top of another box, all using like the web. and of course one of these depth sensing cameras. But still, I feel like this is kind of amazing. So I believe this is probably something a lot of cameras will have in the future. You know, the Apple iPhones have it for like identifying your face because it's much more precise. So this is currently, these extents are behind the flag. It's not shipping yet. These cameras are not in every laptop yet, but I definitely believe they will be in the near future. Something else a lot of company asked us for was actually, please, can you provide like a barcode scanner? Yes, you could do this in JavaScript, but it might take a lot of code, a lot of things to download. It might not be reliable. And a lot of phones actually have that written in hardware, either in hardware or they have a super fast native implementation, taking advantage of something like SIMD and threads. So, like, we added the shape detection API. It actually supports things like face detection, barcode detection, text detection, but currently we're only shipping barcodes because most companies they use barcodes for tracking and QR codes. So if you go to a browser today with Chrome, you can actually do this. Very nice, very simple API. You give it an image, it will give you back a barcode if one exists. If you have a stream, well, then you fetch it per frame. Just call it per frame. It will give you back like where it is, so you can draw on top of it. So like to align or do nice animations and whatever you want. So this is actually shipping now. And you wanna do pizza now? Yeah, I think we should take a break. Yeah, I think that's great because then I can get a bit of beer as well, and my throat will be better. Perfect. Yeah, sounds good. That is in 25 minutes. We'll be back at 7 in 25 minutes because we're gonna eat pizza. And they can order their own pizza. Everyone ready? Perfect. So let's start again. Welcome back. I hope the pizza was great or whatever you had at home. Now we're going to talk about system integration. So with these integrations, like especially like progressive web apps, we really want them to be integrated in the system so they look and act as native app. So one of the features we've been working on is called batching. So this is like when you have this icon on your phone or whatever, you kind of like this small button or number, like unread email, or like there was an update in the app. So we wrote an API for that called a batching API. Very simple. You just set, if it's installed, you can set the batch, like I said, a number of 42. If it supports it, it will write 42. If it doesn't, it might just write like a small dot. For instance, on Android phones, you cannot write a number or anything. You can only like do a dot. So same thing, you can clear it if people actually go in and see that like message or whatever. So this is all about this system integration, and this is shipping today. Something else I've worked on is keeping the screen alive. So we actually had all these people that found out that it's kind of annoying that my monitor turns off. Like I'm doing this presentation, I'm talking 10 minutes about this nice slide, and it turns off, and I need to go and like turn it on again. And especially you can imagine that, like I just talked to one of my friends, Lars, yesterday. He works at a shipping company called Maersk Containers, and they have these dashboards. And these dashboards, like they kind of want them to be turned on all the time, and they're using the web. So either they need to go into like the system settings of Windows and actually turn that on, like please never sleep. Sometimes you're not allowed to do that. Sometimes it's like you need to talk to the administrator. It's kind of complicated. So it would be really nice if you could just do that from the web app. Say like, hey, please, my experience is that I really want to stay on. So what people have been doing so far is that either you force people to go in and turn off sleep mode, really bad for battery life. People go to coffee, the screen is always on, battery drains, bad for like companies Intel trying to get like more battery life. But even like in that case, what did people do? They figured out that if you're playing a video, the screen doesn't turn off. So they made like a 1 pixel video that's just like burning your battery just for your screen to stay on. So if I like, yeah, there's definitely a use case for this. Let's see if we can do this. We want to get rid of this, right? So with this, we create the wake lock API. So this is something that I personally worked on. We thought there's a lot of different use cases, like a recipe thing. You're in the kitchen, you have really dirty fingers. Please don't turn off because I really don't want to wash my fingers to touch my computer or my phone to show what's the next item I need to do. But it could also be for something like using your phone for like a GPS. So we figured out there's actually 2 different kind of wake locks. There's the screen wake lock, just keep the screen on and the CPU. But there might also be the case where you just want the system to be on. Like the screen can turn off, but I'm doing some calculation, so please don't sleep yet. So we actually have both ideas. We ended up shipping initially just the screen wake lock because that has the most use cases. And we've been trying with the system wake lock to find other ways to do the same. So for instance, saying like, I'm downloading a file. So we're having the background fetch API to do that. So you don't need to like download a file directly and keep the system on. Until like, if we can continue just doing that, finding different ways so we don't really need the system wake lock, then we will not pursue this further. But in the case that we really need to do a system wake lock, we have thought about it and we have the specification ready to actually implement this as well. So very simple API. You request a screen wake lock. It says screen because in the future it could be system. It could also be something like a geolocation lock that will maybe keep the GPS on. And then when you don't want it any longer, you just call release. So here I'm just keeping on, for instance, for 10 seconds. If you do something else on your system, like you tap away from the app or you close it automatically, like the screen on your phone, you lose this lock. Like switching away, there's all kinds of ways that the system can say like, okay, you tried, but hey, I'm not giving you a system wake lock or screen wake lock because like you're not using the app. It's in the background. Or you're on low battery power, so I see there's only 1% of battery back left, so no, I'm not gonna do it. You're on like save battery mode or something like that. So this is actually shipping today. So this is pretty cool. And as I said, we have seen a lot of recipe sites using it and Mask using it for some of their dashboards. Something else, especially popular in India and third world countries, is getting access to contacts. So people have been asking about this since forever. I used to work on Tyson with Samsung and the SysApps working group at W3C. People always wanted access to contacts. So like, I want to send an email to someone. I don't know their email, but they're in my contact book. Or send an SMS or something. Just give them access to that once on this website. Or use it like to book, like to start a new experience like Facebook. Where you want like to invite some of your friends. So the idea here is that there's a lot of security issues in giving an app just access to all your contacts all the time. So we did it in a way that it shows you this contact picker, where the application says like what it wants, like I only want phone, only want name, only want email, and then the user can still go and say like no, I'm not sharing phone number, I'm only sharing email, and I'm only sharing these 3 people. We actually had this idea that you could like select all, and that would like remove. So you kind of like need to choose like who you're sharing with to like prevent abuse. Very simple API. I only want to select one, so multiple is false. I want name, email, and telephone number. I ask for it. It's an async function because the dialog might be open for a while. I might get contacts back, or the user might say cancel in case I get an error. Here I chose myself, so I get an array back of some JSON, which here contains, I could have multiple names apparently, or I could have multiple email addresses. That happens. But really, really simple. And this is also shipping, but they're working on a few additions. Something else kind of scary is access to fonts. So you might be wondering, why is access to fonts scary? Is scary in the case that really identifies who you are, like really precisely. Your font system is like unlike anyone else's font system. It will know this is Sherry or this is Kenneth by that. And if every website had access to that, they could be able to track you really easily across the web. But a lot of companies, they really want this, because if you're doing Figma or you're dealing with, like even at Intel, we have a corporate font. It's not available on the web. It's not available inside of Microsoft Office, but I have it on my laptop and I want access to it. So this allows people to actually enumerate these fonts and get access to these specific fonts in these experiences. And as it's something that you enable, for instance, for maybe Outlook or Figma, like the tracking abilities are severely limited in that case. So this is also something that we're currently working on. Something else that I am currently involved with is support for these kind of interesting new set of devices, coming out with either a foldable display or an actual foldable hinge. And even in the future, there might be devices with more than one. Like some OEMs have crazy ideas. Some of these ideas might work, some might not work. But like we need to support it on the web. Otherwise, this definitely won't work. People are not gonna buy a dual screen device that they can only use one screen on. So we're seeing all these kind of new prototypes of ultra portable, flexible devices. So the idea is, of course, these are more for like multitasking. You run more applications, or you do one thing more focused on one screen, something else on another screen. So we worked on a different applications or APIs for this. This is not settled. Worked on a CSS version to deal with spanning across screens. We worked on a JavaScript API. Let's go into these for the same, called window segments. There's a screen fold API to know like how much this is folded, where is the fold. There's integration with Virtual Keyboard. You can see some of the companies being involved with this. And there's even like more coming up with like how to enumerate, because now we're looking at, can we integrate this with actual external monitors as well? Because you might want to show something like a presentation. I might want to have my notes on this one, and this I want something else on this screen, and maybe have a third screen as well. Or maybe even I have one of these like bendable devices, and maybe I use that as an external monitor. For instance, on the Mac OS, you can use an iPad as an external monitor, but now you might be able to use like one with a dual screen device as an external monitor. How do I interact with that? How do I enumerate them? And how do I place windows and contents on these devices? So here's just an example. These are what we call dual screens. They're devices that actually have two or more physical screens, but from the OS level, it's actually one virtual screen. They see it as one screen. It just has a fold or a hinge in between. And the other thing, and then it has segments. So the window manager will know that, okay, I can maximize a window on this segment, or I can maximize on all, or I can maximize it there. But they're really seen as a single screen from the OS and developer point of view. Then you have devices that actually are foldable. So this, of course, is the future, but still a bit of brittle technology. Still, though, you might be able to place one thing on one side and the other side. There still might be issues with, like, it might be difficult to interact or scroll or touch in the full region, especially if it's folded, or because of the technology. Like, it's not as good to touch there because it's actually a folding display. So you want to interact with this. We've also looked at different posture modes. Like you see, there's something that's called laptop mode or tabletop, tablet, however you use these devices. So the first API we're looking at here is the CSS idea. It's called spanning. So the idea is that we actually want to come up, and this is not done yet. This is something I'm currently working on with Microsoft and others. Is that, like, we want a generic API that will cater to most of these upcoming ideas, most of upcoming devices coming out from OEMs and Microsoft, etc. But we also want it to be simple. We don't want it to be an API that people cannot deal with. So they have to invent all kinds of test cases they'll never test for, and they'll end up like, because then they'll end up like hard coding, because this works with this device and no other device, right? So we don't want to end up in that situation. So we want this to be as simple as possible and still have a bit of flexibility to cater for these new experiences. This is the challenge. The first thing we looked at, like I said, like every screen here is considered just another responsive target from the web. It's one viewport. Also on the web, if you have to have two different windows, it's two DOMs. They have to communicate. Much more difficult. Much easier to just have one. Keep it simple and familiar. So this is what we call a single full vertical device, single full horizontal. This is when you have none. So a lot of people ask, like, why? We already have orientation. We have orientation lock. We have the ratio meter. Why isn't that enough? And like this kind of shows it as that you might have like a window like the Edge browser just on one of these, so it's kind of portrait, but the device itself is in landscape. So like you really need to know the difference. One example, see, like I just set the background to orange, works fine. I could use the width to try to turn this one like green. It's kind of what people are doing today, for instance with mobile. But here I can also use something like the single full vertical, and I can target this specific device, even though it might have the same size as this one and not be a phone. So what we kind of want to do is that we want to have control over the spanning. So like this, the experience looks really nice. I'm looking at an article, and maybe this is Pinterest. I click on something, I see details here. What I don't want is like cut in the middle thing. This is like really not nice, especially if you have a hinge, or because of the touch read is really bad on a foldable display. So kind of like this example done by one of my coworker and me. So it's like a small like a photo viewer, put into spanning mode, and images are cut. This is not the experience that people want. This is like supposed to show my hero images, and they're like cut in the middle. So I want to control that and get like these kind of experiences. So this is actually the experience that we ended up with using these APIs. So the idea is very simple. CSS now have something called environmental variables, invented by the iPhone because it had the cutout. So it became a generic thing. So this is on this Surface Duo device. This is where you have the hinge. So you have this like fold left, it's there. There's a fold top, it's there. And with these fold top, fold left, fold width, fold height, you can actually position things as I just did in that example. The other API is that what we realize is that sometimes you have apps that actually don't use CSS because it could be the Autodesk thing you showed before. That was all done by Canvas and WebAssembly. So for this, we have an API where you can actually get the actual values from JavaScript, so-called the window segmentation API. I think we'll probably end up changing this to something like called screen segmentation, because it's more screen than it's actually window. But like the idea would remain the same. So this will just basically allow me to get the exact coordinates of these regions from JavaScript, which I can then like provide to WebAssembly. So this is kind of nice if you have something like WebGL, CSS Paint Worklet, or like you need to do all this kind of layout at runtime. Like even if you're inventing your own layout system. But of course, like I said, in the future we might have more than one fold. So we're really looking into how to solve this without making this the simple case any more complicated. Another issue we had is keyboard. So on keyboard today, what normally happens if you have like a mobile device, the keyboard pops up, the viewport actually resizes. And that's kind of nice because like where you had like the text input would kind of like move up with it, and that's kind of fine. But it's kind of not so nice if you have like two screens and the keyboard pops up on one side, because now you have this background here, and this is where I had my Outlook emails. I just wanted to compose over here. I still want to see my emails down here. So what we came up with is a way that you can do an overlay. You can kind of tell the keyboard like, hey, don't resize the viewport, just like stay on top of it. But then at least like give me the coordinates. So I emulated this. This isn't a demo I did, like to show you how you can emulate this. And I even showed you how you can integrate it with like with CSS. So you can still like when you click on something, you'll still like scroll into region, like into view and the like. So you can do this. So the idea is you have, this is the current API, you have a geometry change event, so you get like where the boundary rect is, so you can still like move things next to it. But it's more like you opt into this and then you need to deal with it yourself. Together with Diego from Samsung, I've been working a bit on actually getting access to the fold state itself. Sometimes you just want to know the posture, because the experience you want to show, like, it's in tent mode, I don't want to show anything on the other side, or maybe I do, maybe it's like a battle, one of my friends did a battleship game, so you really only want that in tent mode, because you don't want people to see where you put the ships. So like, if you have it in tent mode, it will show the game thing, otherwise it won't. So we wrote this like screenfold API explainer, where we create all these kind of different postures that you could subscribe to. We actually looked at, I talked to people internally at Samsung and Google, and who talked to people at Microsoft, to actually find out exactly what are the different angles that people currently use to make this kind of like a more standardized experience. So maybe people want to like change this a little bit, but we at least wanted some kind of like good recommendations, so that people like when they test on one device, it will kind of work the same on other devices. So here's one example where I'm actually using the other API together. So say if it's kind of in this like laptop posture and it's in single fold, then I do this experience. We also have a way that you can get the actual angle change. So there are like people that want, for instance, kids books. When you open it up, something pops out. So you could do something like this. Here we're just trying to rotate some fishes. So I wrote a small polyfill that allows you. It's not really a polyfill because like it won't work with the device itself, but it allows you to write like a demo and actually use this like slider and change things and actually see how it responds. So it's kind of like nice to play around with it and see how it would work. So the status and progress is that some of this is experimental today. Everything is experimental, but it actually works across different Microsoft devices. Actually, this also works now on the Android device, Surface Duo. So we've also been working on polyfills, so you can play with this in your browser today. Have the CSS foldable display polyfill. There's something called a window segmentation polyfill. This one uses the other. It at least does today. And then I had this idea like, it would be really nice with a small widget that you could, just a web component, just put it inside your HTML, and you get this like very nice small widget that you can control it. So we have some cool demos here from a coworker, and it should actually be showing those widgets. So yeah, it's a bit bad quality, but have the small widget. You can hide it; it will disappear. He will show you the experience here on one screen. click on dual screen on the small widget, and you can see like you play with this. This is using the polyfill. And then I think you can even rotate, and you can like, you do all kinds of like, you can even like see the device and choose like different devices, and see how it would work there. So really trying to like get people access to this feature early on and experiments with them. This is the battleship thing. It's actually out on the Windows Central blog now because it's one of the cool apps for the new Surface Duo, because there are not many apps, but apparently our demo is pretty cool, so I'm very happy about that. And we're actually writing a blog post for the Microsoft blog about this, so stay tuned. So you see, like this is like showing like what you can do and how our nice emulator actually emulates the devices. And this is also just like a web component you pop into your website and you can play around with it. DevTool support. In Edge, after they launched the Surface Duo, it's an Origin trial, so you can use this feature without any polyfill by signing up for an Origin trial. This is a Microsoft Edge Origin trial. It's not a Chrome Origin trial. They have different systems for Origin trials. Very important. And the DevTools inside of Microsoft Edge actually have the ability today to choose these devices and do dual screen. So it's kind of the same as we're doing with the polyfill, but now it's just like built in. Because of course this will be the way that people will work with this in the future. Yeah. Yeah, you should be able to. I don't know if it's in Canary. It might be in Canary. But of course, like the website needs to then opt into the Origin trial to get access to the feature. So this is like what we're working on. As I said, like we're working on all kind of figuring out like what is the right way to do this. There's still like a lot of unknowns, but I think we're getting pretty close to have something nice. And there's already things that people can play around with. Something else that Microsoft has been driving is that now they're doing like all progressive web apps for everything. They realize that a lot of apps kind of have these custom toolbars. Like I see Visual Studio Code, let's do the toolbar, like the menus in the toolbar, or let's do a search field. I think even like Spotify has a search field in the toolbar. But the problem on the web is that you can do phishing. So if you make another app that looks like your bank or whatever, and you'll just make everything look exactly the same, you might go into the wrong experience and it will cheat you. So there's a lot of work going on. There will be some trusted UI that always have to be visible. So you kind of like end up with the right balance that people know. So for instance, also when you load the app, it will show you like the URL. So like, you'll see that it's not like a phishing site. So this is kind of like before we started Fugu. This is kind of like the Chrome story. We had support for all kinds of things, all kinds of APIs already. Like vibration API. I use it on Twitter now. I have the Twitter progressive web app. Every time I click on a like by mistake, it does a vibration, and it's really like, I clicked on like the wrong tweet. So it's like all these things like really make that experience like fully like complete. So we had like home screen installation, device motion, geolocation, all of this. But with Fugu, like we're getting all kinds of extra APIs, and I think this is really exciting. So if you have any request for something you really want or you need for your company, just go to bit.ly/new Fugu request. Just go there. It might not be supported, but like, hey, we want to hear from as many people as possible. Especially if your company, Reddit, people from Google really want to partner up with people, because like none of these APIs are shipping unless we have at least one company that is ready to use it. Like we're not shipping anything that no one is using. That is kind of like the deal breaker. So this is kind of like the last slide, but I really want us to go to the Fugu API tracker and have a look at like what is the status now. So feel free to join the effort. We have a Fugu sync meeting between every 2 weeks. You need to be invited, but you just write people, and this is where we're discussing about what the companies are working on. So it's mostly like Samsung, Microsoft, Google, Intel. In the W3C, well, the CSS working group for the CSS features, second screen incubation group for a lot of these second screen things, as well as the device and sensors working group, DAS, So we are doing a lot there. If you want to stay in touch or have any questions, feel free to follow me on Twitter. A lot in the web community happens on Twitter, so if you're not on Twitter, you should be. I wasn't for a while. It was a mistake. You can follow me on @Kenneth Rohde. But with that said, I think we should go and have a look at that website. So, there it was. So as you see some features here are supported by Google. There's one from Microsoft. There's Intel. Like I said, I worked on WebNFC. And you'll see that this is within 1 year. This is already shipping. Like WebShare Target. Support for sending file WebShare. Programmably copying image to clipboard. A new version of this programmable web apps installation. Custom interkey on virtual keyboard, so you can say like go or search and whatnot. Quota for storage, like you can expand it. There's a contact picker. You can ask if people install the related native app, so maybe you don't want to promote installing the progressive web app. There's you can compress, like zip compress streams. You can sync things in the background. There's a minimal UI thing for progressive web apps. You can do the notification badge I was showing. You can even do it from a service worker, so it can update in the background. You can detect barcodes. You can make sure that the screen doesn't sleep. There's a one-time password sent with SMS that can directly show into the UI and put it into your special field. There's a special way you need to construct the SMS, done in collaboration with Apple. There's a content indexing API where you can content like if you have something offline, you can kind of like expose that in Chrome. So if you're offline, Chrome can expose that as like, oh yeah, there's a new article. And you can even do a shortcut menu. It's also something I worked on. So if you long press on Android or right click on Windows, you get this like menu like compose email, do new calendar. You can do that for web apps as well. This is all within 1 year. And that's already shipping. And you see this is the stable version, this is the beta, this is the canary. And you see very soon like this is going to ship as well. So you have back pressure for web app, you have native file systems that it's not shipping yet. It's in beta right now. So that will be shipping in next version. And you can kind of like see like a lot of things are happening. This is more just behind the flag. So these are things that you can play around with today. Like file handling, this is like, you can say an app is an image editor. So if you go to Windows or Chrome OS and click on the image, it will be able to launch that progressive web app. There's WebHit, I was showing about Windows placement for placing Windows across different screens. You see that there's all kinds of things. Web codec, access to hardware implemented codecs so that you can configure and small differences without having to fall back to software and WebAssembly. There's Microsoft working on run on OS login for like application that needs to launch when you start like Microsoft Teams, especially interesting for like the enterprise. Pan tilt zoom very soon as well, that you can use like the new like Google Meet have like pan to zoom tilt enabled cameras for like meeting rooms. Like all of this will be possible on the web. And you can see like even more that these are things that we're considering or like some people is playing around with currently. So there's a lot of things going on. But I already think that like all of this happened in 1 year, and you see a lot of things happening very, very soon as well. So I think it's like the web is really exciting to see the web, especially on Chromium based browsers. Like you will see Microsoft and Google support this across all of their devices. And of course with the hope that at least like Apple will implement the most important of these APIs because users and developers will demand it. So with that said, I will say thank you very much for listening, and I hope you had an enjoyable evening, some good pizza and beer, what else, Coke. And if you have any questions, like you can just talk to me now or follow me on Twitter and ask me there. So, any questions? Yeah.
The absence of Apple. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, as Apple will say, is that they don't comment on the future roadmaps. But like it's obvious that Apple have a very nice walled ecosystem with native apps that work really well for them. And the web is kind of like opening up all the competitors to do the same across different OSs. So it's maybe not their best interest to improve the web too much. Apple cares a lot about the experience today. They want developers that have a phone or iPad to believe that they get the best web experience for the web of today. So I think Apple is very focused on making the web of today really great, but they don't really push the envelope. They don't try to improve the web of today because like they don't need to. Like they have their great native offerings as well. But in the case that maybe in a few years, like people think like, well, Safari is not like the regular people think like Safari is not such a good browser, or like my website launches faster on Chrome because it supports service workers. Then Apple will do that and implement that, and that's exactly what happened with service workers. In W3C, on the Twitter, people's like service workers the worst idea ever. We'll never do this. This is bad. Blah blah blah. One day, Apple supports service workers. Apple said the same about progressive web apps. They never mentioned progressive web apps. They implemented a lot of the features. It's slowly, but like you can bet that if Apple wants everyone to believe that their browser is capable and is there for the web of today. So as the web of today changes and requires more of these features, Apple will implement. They might make few restrictions. They might try to make it better with security and whatnot, which is great. But don't expect them to like push this beyond their native apps. They only will do it enough that their web is capable enough for the web of today. They're not trying to compete against their native offerings. That is my take on Apple. So
On the other side of the scale, there's no like smaller companies either in that world. Do you have like smaller startups with a niche idea that
well, a lot of these APIs are. I cannot talk that everyone like Google said like they've been really proactive in talking to customers, so they often don't want to like the customers don't want to mention who they are. So there might be a small startup, there might be a big company that actually need these APIs. You do see other companies like Samsung has like they're not driving this. It's also a new product, but like we've had Samsung work on me on the fold screen fold thing. So we got Samsung involved. They're also in the meetings. We've had other companies in the meetings, but like going in and actually writing a web standard and knowing how all this process works is not something that you just do. It's kind of also a big investment. So I can understand like it's not something that is something you really need to consider because it's a pretty big investment to drive a web standard. Doing reach out to developers, talking to customers, talking to companies, then actually going through like being part of the W3C and like then figure out how to do a write spec text, how to write a specification. There's no compiler that tells me is like you need to learn it, you need to communicate, you need to get to know people. And like how do you then get all the feedback from the developers? Well, you need to like me to go out to these like meetups and conferences and get that feedback. It's a big investment. A lot of companies they don't do that. But you are seeing a lot of companies, like even that you don't know, like it could be like Fastly or what's called CloudSource or CloudForce or all these companies on the networking side. They're also working on WebAssembly and all of these things. So you see like a lot of people running like WebAssembly on the edge, like for CDNs and the like. But they're not. It's not necessarily Fugu, but they're still involved with all these web standards. So this is more like this is about capabilities. And I think most companies that will need one of these capabilities, they don't know where to start. So it's much easier to go and talk to Microsoft. Like people talk to Microsoft through their enterprise connections, or they talk to Google through their connections, and then you get like Google and Microsoft to drive one of these features, or Intel, when they hear that's a big demand for it. I don't think you'll see the company come and do that themselves. They might providing feedback, but actually doing it is not that easy. Any other question? Yeah.
It wasn't entirely clear to me. Do you have to use a progressive web app to use these APIs?
No. Yeah, so the question is like, it wasn't clear to him whether you need to be a progressive web app to use these features. By default, no, you do not need to be a progressive web app. So getting access to native files and whatever, you don't need to be a progressive web app. But in some cases, like I wanted to be able to be a share target, like someone should be able to share to me. Like you cannot just share to a random website, then you kind of need to be installed. So in that case, you need to be a progressive web app. The same thing as the batching thing. You need to have the icon in your menu on your phone background. So in that case, you need to be a progressive web app. So on this list, you see that those that are kind of requiring the progressive web app thing will have this pin. So you see like app shortcut menus because you need the icon, progressive web app, batching, progressive web app, or there's also batching. The minimal is like the layout mode of progressive web app is very progressive web app. But all the others like background sync, compression codecs, picker, native file system, all of these, they don't need to be progressive web app. So by default, we're not trying to limiting anything to progressive web apps.
But you would have to be using Edge Canary or Chrome Canary, and the user has to be using Canary browser.
No. All of these that are shipping in this release with the Fugu thing, so these are before, these are in this release, or like even this release now, it's stable. On Edge or Chrome, you don't need to do an origin trial, and you don't need you just need the stable version. You can use these APIs. These APIs that in the future of course, like you see this, you need to use the beta channel, and these are like in the Canary channel. The green area is when there's running an origin trial. So like you cannot use like back pressure for WebSocket right now. I can use it in stable, but I need to sign up for an origin trial. It's supposed to be shipping the version after. Here, NFC, as an origin trial right now, it's supposed to be shipping. So when Canary becomes stable, it's shipping.
But for those with the green boxes,
That is the origin trial. Green box means origin trial.
user have to be on that browser as well.
Well, the user needs to be on one of the browsers in that line where you see the green of either Edge or Chrome. Yes. And here the website would then need a token for that version. I hope that cleans it up. You also had a question?
Yeah, well, it's from a security perspective, this scares the shit out of me. I mean, it feels like it would open up an enormous amount of possibilities to breach security or integrity, especially since Google is one of the drivers behind it.
Oh, I didn't get the question, but yeah.
Is this secure?
Yes, this is secure. Like I said, there's a
The web is secure.
everything is as secure as it's everyone does the best to ensure the security, right, and privacy. So all of these APIs have been going through Intel's and Google's and Microsoft security teams. They have looked at all the ways of known attacks and continues doing so. So everything's implemented. So if you have like the Bluetooth things, well, it will be like sandboxed inside how the implementation is happening. But like a regular website won't even have access. It's totally sandboxed. So only if you go to a specific website that requests it, and for that specific device with the trusted UI, will get access until the session ends. So every API is looked at from security point of view, and nothing is auto-granted unless it's totally safe. So I think one thing that's auto-granted today is this screen wake lock. And it's auto-granted because people could already do it today by playing a video. And people were doing it today. So Google believed that, well, we don't need to do anything else because it's really like people are already doing it and they're doing worse. The API is still designed in a way that you kind of do is an async function to request it. So in the future, if people start abusing it, or we can figure out this site is doing it a lot or at wrong weird times, then we could like add a prompt in between and say like, hey, do you really want to do this on this website? We have Google has indicated that this website is very spammy, so we want to stop it. For instance, they made mistakes early on with the push notifications that you could do it on load. So now basically every API that needs like some UI will need a user gesture. So like not just on load, you need to click on something or like a button and then you can ask for permission. So even with that today, with that mistake, they're like saying, oh, this site is very spammy. They're doing exactly on load, and then they'll like just like auto like mute it, and it'll just show in the toolbar like, hey, this one tried to get access. So like there's always mitigations built in. Like we try as much as possible that everything will have to ask for permission in some way or something that's clear. They cannot just do it automatically. It has to be in context. So that's why we have user gestures and other ways. and then maybe it's only per session, or it can be easily removed again. In a company, the administrator might even like block it for a certain website, or outright say like you cannot talk to Bluetooth at all. So that definitely everyone is thinking about security and privacy at all the time. It's a core tenet of the web. We want the web, we call it the drive-by web. Like when you surf the web, you don't want like just by clicking on a link that suddenly that website you loaded is trying to access my Bluetooth devices. No, that is not possible. I know that I didn't really have those examples in this talk. I think it's pretty long already, but that's kind of like how it works. So I said, like for instance, for web Bluetooth, like you need to click, you need to show a dialog that makes it really clear that this website is trying to connect to Bluetooth, and you need to say like cancel or choose the exact device that want to. And of course, the website can give some kind of filtering, but none of that data, none of what you see is shared with the website at all, until you say like this is the device I allow. Then the website get access. Yes. Yeah, like currently some of these are like only per session, like Bluetooth and USB. There's some work on allowing you to maybe be able to like to keep it across session so you can connect next time again. But even like in that case, you still like maybe like show some UI that'll indicate that auto connected and like block. So there's always this like there's a lot of thought about this, like how to do it, because we also realize that if you show prompt on every website, then people is gonna get prompt fatigue, and they're either saying yes or no. So like we really want like some of the things, if it can be granted, like say wake lock without any problem, then just show some kind of indicator like, hey, it's on. Well, the screen is kind of on, but like you can like indicate that something happened and still allow people to opt out, because it's not really a security problem. The screen is on for a minute longer than usual. Not a big issue. But like we think about every case, and this really depends on every single API. And that's why we use the product name Fugu, because it's really about we really need to get this right, and we really need to think about privacy and security while doing this. But if we don't do it, the web becomes irrelevant, and soon no one is using the web for anything, and in a few years like no one will use the web and even remember what the web was. And we have lost a big part of our culture and this open platform where everyone can do their own thing without having to sign up to some specific store guidelines, and you can just like put your own server and create your own experience, right? Your own company. You can create like Amazon, whatever has been created on the web. Like, would that have been possible with the App Store from Apple? Probably not, because they would have wanted like 30% of all the transfers, and it might not have made sense. Yeah.
Should we continue with just
Yeah, let's say bye to the live stream, and thank you for tuning in and watching this talk. And take care.